Well, it's been 8 days since the election was held, and across the country, dazed college students are finally emerging from their safe zones into the glare of daylight with bullhorns and signs in their hands. At least 80 colleges are now staging anti-Trump protests or walkouts. One of them is at Rutgers, that's the State University of New Jersey. And joining us now, one of the protesters, organizers, Rutgers students, Alex Uematsu. Alex, it's great to see you tonight. So since you're in college and you're thinking of the big things, the big ideas here, you're upset that there are undocumented students, as you say, on your campus, and you don't think President-elect Trump is sympathetic enough to them. So let's sort of pull back a little bit. Who do you think has a right to come to this country? You apparently assume that these people have a right to be on your campus taking a state-subsidized education. Who has a right to come to the United States?
I believe that everyone should be able to come to the United States. We are always and have been and are still a nation of immigrants. And so I believe that, you know, there is no line. We can let in as many people as we choose in terms of policy. And it's, you know, there's artificial limits set on who can come in, who can't, from what countries and from what countries can't,
right,
whether they're skilled or not. And I feel like that is abandoning our heritage as a nation of immigrants.
So anybody who wants to come should come. Now, most of those people who do come, the low-skilled ones, are a net cost to taxpayers. They take more in services than they produce. You know the supply and you know the basic economic laws. So you believe then that taxpayers have a moral obligation to subsidize anybody who wants to come here?
I'm not sure where you're getting those figures from. I've heard different figures.
Okay.
I've heard studies that say that undocumented immigrants actually provide a net benefit to the economy.
Okay.
And a lot of these studies that claim that undocumented immigrants are a drain or you know, taking money away from taxpayers or something like that are using kind of biased
yeah. Well, you heard wrong, because it's not even close between education and infrastructure and health care, food subsidies, housing subsidies. It's literally not even close. Mm-hmm. But the point is, do you consider the effect this has on the rest of the population? You say anybody around the world has a right to come here. You learned that in school and you believe it uncritically. Do you think that everyone else who lives in this country has a right to say, wait a second, we should be able to choose who comes here?
So we shouldn't forget that we're talking about a president-elect
right,
that has pledged to deport 11 million people from this country. And so that's what I would like to keep the focus on, is the tremendous human rights violation that would entail. A deportation force rounding up people who are undocumented, people who have been here for their entire lives, almost. People, you know, we had a person at our rally today who was, you know, who was brought here at 3 months old. And he's, you know, he's undocumented, but he's an American. He deserves to be here. And you know,
I get it. No, I've heard it before. Alex, do you think people have a right to lock their doors? Or do you think they have an obligation to let anyone in who chooses to come? Well, you're saying that the United States has no right to prevent people who want to come here from coming here. And I'm just asking you, does the same apply to us as individuals? Do you have a right to keep people out who want to share your apartment with you?
I think that's not really a direct analogy. That obviously a nation state, a sovereign nation state, is very different from an individual.
Well, it belongs to its citizens, so they should be able to decide who comes in or out. Wouldn't you agree? Doesn't the country belong to its citizens?
I think that there are certain things.
I think you need to think
like
this through, Alex.
Slavery was a democratic.
Right. Okay. Throw the slavery thing
was a democratic.
Let me just ask you this. I know that you're a liberal, a radical, lefty. I wonder if it ever occurs to you that you're maybe doing the bidding of business when you advocate for low-skilled workers to come here. Why do you think people support a lot of low-skilled labor in this country? Because it lowers wages. It lowers their labor costs. It makes them more money. Do you realize that you're part of that?
So the Cosecha movement, which I'm a part of, is a movement fighting for permanent protection, dignity, and respect for all immigrants in the United States. It would be absurd to suggest that we're pro-corporate or we're somehow helping corporations when our strategy is a massive boycott of key industries, as well as a general strike led by undocumented immigrants, just, you know, regular immigrants and also allies.
Well, then it may surprise you to know that they're fully on your side with bringing the low-wage labor thing, because it benefits them too. So think about that overnight, Alex. It's great to see you. Thanks a lot for coming on.
is permanent protection, dignity, and respect.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm for that too. Thanks. I think you need to think this through, Alex.
Slavery was a democratic...
Right, okay, throw the slavery thing in there.
was a democratic...
Let me just ask you this. I know that you're a liberal or radical. What is going on? And by the way, what exactly is a safe space? Joining us now is Jill Hopkins. She's an assistant professor of journalism at DePaul University, and she had a very emotional group of kids in her classroom shortly after Hillary's concession speech. Professor, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
But it's also about having safe spaces. And at the University of Michigan Law School, where adults presumably attend, and I'm quoting now, post-election self-care and food and play. So this included Play-Doh and Legos, a safe space for people to go to, you know, feel, I don't know what. And that is kind of the question to you. What is a safe space exactly?
Well, in my opinion, the role of higher education is to foster debate, but also to be cognizant of students that are coming to our campuses from many different backgrounds. I work at DePaul University, which is an urban campus here in Chicago, a very diverse campus. Right. And so, for example, in my class, the way that I approached it the day after the election was to return to themes that we had talked about prior to the election in terms of the role of a press in a free society. And
okay,
the role
but wait
of the press
a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you. And I think those are great questions, and I'm glad that you're raising them. But the role of the university, in practical terms, is not to foster the debate, it's to squelch it. And so people who disagree are crushed, and people who agree with the herd are elevated. I mean, is there really a debate? Do you know a single DePaul University professor who voted for Trump and said so out loud? Do you know one?
You know what? I do not talk about my personal political leanings with my colleagues.
You know as well as I that there isn't any at all. And isn't that a problem? Isn't that a lack of diversity?
I don't think that you have any evidence to support that claim, and that's actually not the right question. The right question is the role of the university to, again, I teach journalism, and so what I said to my students the day after the election was returning to the role of a press in a free society. And our role as journalists, as you would know, is to hold all elected officials accountable, regardless of our personal political leanings.
But also our powerful people. And you're a professor, and so you fall into that category, if I can say, as someone to whom others look for guidance. And I just kind of want to press you on this diversity question. So the whole idea of diversity is that the airless room produces bad decisions. We need people from different walks of life who have different points of view in order to make wise decisions. I think that's the underlying justification for it. And yet, in academia, there's virtually no one who disagrees from the liberal orthodoxy. Isn't it, and this is a sincere question, isn't it time for some sort of affirmative effort to bring people who disagree from other walks of life into your world?
Well, we certainly try to foster discussion, debate, and have dialogue about the role of free speech on college campuses, the role of free speech in society, and certainly I think that this election does bear out that we need to find ways to reach across partisan divides and speak with those who do not share our own views.
Well, fostering a conversation about free speech is different from allowing free speech. I know this, unfortunately. But, Professor, you're game to come on, and I appreciate your point of view. Thanks a lot.
Fatality.
Whoopi's mad. Many on the left are arguing that Jeff Sessions is morally unfit to serve as Attorney General. Among them, our next guest, columnist Jonathan Allen of Roll Call. Jonathan, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
So you wrote a column about Sessions before today's announcement, but recently.
Right.
And I got to say, it's one of the most unfair things I think I've ever read.
Okay.
I mean, it's almost like a pure download from the DNC website. You say, among many other things, Sessions is a favorite of Stormfront, the white nationalist web community founded by former Klansman Don Black. Is there any evidence that he's had contact with Stormfront, endorsed Stormfront, or are you just smearing him on the basis of their endorsement of him?
Well, look, I'm not saying that he's like a member of Stormfront or anything.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that he is a favorite of people who hold bigoted views, and that's not.
So if someone you don't like says something nice about you, you're tainted by that?
Well, I think if you look at the history and the pattern of Jeff Sessions, he said things over the course of time that should make
You said something really specific. You said he was endorsed by Stormfront. But I'm sure he would disavow that immediately. So why is that fair to write that?
He hasn't disavowed it that I know of.
Oh, so you think he agrees with Stormfront? Is that what do you have evidence for that?
I don't know, but the point that I would make about Jeff Sessions, and the larger point of the column, is Americans should have a right to feel that they are going to be equally protected under the law. And Jeff Sessions, over the course of time, and I pointed out a lot of other things in that column, has said and done things that should make people some people feel uncomfortable with the idea that he's going to treat them fairly under the law.
I don't think, here's what people have a right to, is the expectation that if someone's going to throw out a charge, that it's substantiated. It's not just by implication. In this McCarthy way, you say, among other things that I'm quoting now, surely Sessions wouldn't try to resegregate the American armed forces in which he served. Really? Jonathan Allen, surely you wouldn't batter a child. What does that mean? Nobody suggested
you're right, I wouldn't.
No, but nobody suggested he would resegregate the armed forces.
Well, Jeff Sessions has been opposed to the Voting Rights Act in the past.
Opposed? Is that the same as resegregating the American armed forces?
Well,
I mean, that's a really appalling thing to say about somebody.
Wait a second. It's not that far of a cry for some people.
But has that suggestion ever come up? That's specific. We're talking
about the Attorney General of the United States.
No, we're talking about your column.
We're talking about the Attorney General.
You suggested that was even a possibility. He would resegregate the U.S. Armed Forces, and I'm asking where.
I said he wouldn't.
Okay, well, you wouldn't beat your wife.
But however,
you're attacking him.
However,
but not directly.
However, there are the Armed Forces of the United States is one of the institutions that is most racially diverse, most ethnically diverse in our country, right?
Right.
Lots of people of all sorts of backgrounds in the United States Armed Services. First integrated by Harry Truman, way back when. All of those people who are not white people would have to have faith, and the reason that came up is we're talking about a potential defense secretary appointment for him at some point. Should they be able to have faith that their leader doesn't discriminate against them or is not prejudiced against them?
Because there's literally no possibility that he wants to do that he would suggest doing it, or that he would do it. But you're fear-mongering. But by the way, you know what else is a very diverse place? Is the state of Alabama, which he's represented for 20 years. Is 25% African-American. Can you name, in the 20 years he has served, 19 as senator, a single instance where he's mistreated someone on the basis of his race? Ever. One.
Well, senators don't typically walk around mistreating their citizens.
You're calling the guy a racist, so why don't you throw some examples?
Well, I'll give you an example of something that I think should worry people if they believe in the equal protection of the law.
Right.
When he talks about immigration, right? He's a big anti-immigration guy, wants to crack down on immigration. When President Obama said he was going to put 2,000 minors, undocumented minors in Alabama,
you mean here illegally?
Children. Yes, here illegally, children.
Okay.
In the state of Alabama, Jeff Sessions' response was, we're going to have to treat them and feed them and let them go.
Okay.
I'm
missing your point. Was the state not on the hook for feeding and clothing those kids?
He was complaining about the idea that that the state of Alabama was going to have to feed and clothe children.
Okay, but
do you think
so that makes him
that's
racist?
Such an awful?
I mean, that's your example of his racism? Are you being serious?
First of all, I don't think I called him racist.
You called him racist like 9 times in the column. I mean, it's
no, but if we're going to use the word,
and I'm asking you, what's the example of his racism? And you don't have one.
Wait, now wait a second. Well, if you want to go back, no, what you asked me was what's recent.
Yeah,
so in
1986, he's been a U.S. senator.
1986,
he's been overwhelmingly re-elected for 20 years, and I'm asking of one instance where he's been racist. You don't have one.
Are you saying
you downloaded some talking points from the DNC?
Well, first of all, I wrote that column before Sessions was nominated.
I mean, this is just a totally hack job.
You asked me for instances of him doing racist things.
Yeah.
Oh, well, now wait a second. You asked me for recent examples, and your argument is that you could serve in the Senate for 20 years. And just because you served in the Senate for 20 years, you were elected to the Senate, you're not racist?
My argument
that is at odds with American history.
My argument is that before you call someone racist and suggest that he has ties to, you do repeatedly, and suggest that he has ties to Stormfront and might resegregate the armed forces, you might have some facts.
I have some facts.
You don't.
In 1986, he called the NAACP un-American.
Really? Because
I'm sorry, that was during his hearing. He had done it previously.
I think the NAACP is a totally discredited group. Does that make me a racist? I mean, let's get back to reality a little bit. You also say this. You're not alone in saying this. He is, quote, beyond the ideological fringe.
That's true.
Really? Because I actually looked up some of his views, which I'm very familiar with.
Yeah.
What percentage of Americans do you think believe we need to reduce the amount of immigration into this country?
I think a lot of Americans.
Oh, a majority. Did you know that?
I think a lot of Americans believe that.
So
you realize that immigration from Mexico right now is actually going the other way?
I realize that has nothing to do with the question I asked you. You said he is on the ideological fringe, and my point is the fringe is far outside the mainstream. And by definition, that view is at the very center of the country. It's the opposite of the fringe.
That's one view that he holds that's in the mainstream.
So why don't you, since we're on TV live, give me an example of an opinion he has that is on the ideological fringe?
He wants to ban same-sex marriage. That's on the ideological fringe.
Is that true?
Well, from your argument about a majority of Americans supporting reduced immigration, a majority of Americans also support same-sex marriage.
the majority of U.S. states held referenda on that exact subject, and it passed. So, like, what world are you in?
A majority of the American people, go look at polling, a majority of the American people, and by the way, the Supreme Court of the United States, right, he's going to uphold the laws.
But at the moment when it was, look, I'm not arguing against gay marriage, just to be totally clear. I'm just saying to be out or beyond, as you put it, the ideological fringe, you have to have a view that is held by a tiny minority, and you have not named one.
He believes.
So this is a slur against him.
Wait a second. He believes that the Confederate flag, as he said a couple of years ago, represents a great achievement of the United States.
Okay, well, I don't even know what that means, but that's the basis upon which you're saying he's, quote, beyond the ideological.
I think that's beyond the ideological.
You're carrying water for the Democratic Party, and
I'm
you're
not
smearing this guy without engaging his ideas.
I wrote about this before this even became an issue.
Well, they were going
carrying
after
water,
him.
talking points. I mean, that's
These
ridiculous.
are pure talking points because you don't back it up. I would go write a column where you say, he says this is the policy that he proposes, and here's why it's wrong. And instead it's, he's endorsed by Stormfront.
He said the KKK was okay until he found out that they smoked pot.
You know, I can't.
He actually said that.
Really think,
he acknowledged that in a hearing, in a congressional hearing.
That Jeff Sessions is pro-KKK. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying
then what are you saying? What
I'm saying is he said that he thought they were okay.
So what he said was, I told a joke about marijuana that was a bad joke. He never said I'm for the KKK. And
well, I mean, if that's your standard.
That's his standard. I'm asking you a really simple question. Do you think he's for the KKK or not?
I don't know.
Well, you don't know.
I don't know.
Then why are you suggesting he is?
All I said is what he said.
Look, I'm just saying, engage the guy on the facts. Jonathan Allen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tyler.
Fatality.
I think you need to think this through, Al.
Slavery was a democratic.
Right, okay, throw the slavery.
This guy was sweating so badly. Oh, he was sweating. Honestly, it was disgusting. All right?
All right, look, we appreciate you coming on.
I'm loving it. No, I don't get tired. It's lovely, right? High energy.
And I'm coming through the door.